I guess you start, right?
Well, this is just like a conversation between us. So this is as if we're just capturing us in a moment in our lives.
So you'd say we've actually begun then. I was waiting for the 3, 2, 1 and like some really amazing sound. How long do you want this intro to be? Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Might be the best part. We don't
probably
know.
will be the best part, I'm sure.
Who's our audience?
My mom. That's not even a joke. It was financed by Mattel and Canon Films, and Mattel put up their part of the money, and Canon Films, they did not.
This is going to be interesting.
But I love this film, and that's an unironic statement. I just want to make that clear.
2 words come to mind when I think of this movie, and those words are not good.
So I think good might be an adequate word for this. Not
I mean,
much beyond good.
Them feeling the need to introduce some, like, what I would call maybe like a fuzzy brown dust bunny.
It's a movie made by a toy company, though. Sure, they want to make new toys, too.
I am firmly against dinosaurs coming to a city, Smurfs coming to a city, pretty much any storyline where they feel like they need to have the characters come to New York. I'm pretty much against.
Well, they definitely don't go to New York.
I see a young girl in a jean jacket,
Courtney Cox
playing with some tube that has sparkles on it.
Cosmic Key.
I just want it to be a movie in Eternia.
It's not a perfect movie by any stretch. I don't want to oversell it, but I do think it's better by far than its reputation.
I'm probably going to judge it on my ability to stay awake. He's got a gun. He-Man's got a gun. I don't know why He-Man needs a gun. Skeletor looks like an old bag of potato chips. I'm just...
Best thing in the movie, Skeletor.
That there's somebody named Christina Pickles. And that's just a great name. That would be on the short list of last names if I was going to change my name to have like a stage name. I'd be Bryan Pickles.
Or Pickles Langer, I think.
I like Pickles Langer. The clown who came to my birthday party was Pickles the Clown.
That sounds like a terrifying birthday party.
Yeah.
We're recording this, hopefully to get it posted in time for PowerCon, which I will be at. So hopefully this video will be up shortly before that, or if not, shortly after that. But at the last PowerCon, I got concept art from Mark Taylor, one of the creators of He-Man, prints. And so I've had one for Bryan since that point. Signed to Bryan Pickles right there.
Oh my god.
This is one of the characters. This is Face Shifter.
Wow. And who did Face Shifter become?
Manny Faces. So this is an early concept of what that character became. I'll share it now as we record this just because, and I'll share it again at the time of this being posted. So Josiah is right. The same as the YouTube channel that this is on. WRITE as in writer, not as in I am correct, because as Bryan knows, I'm rarely correct.
Especially when it comes to writing letters.
But I am right. Yes.
Josiah is sometimes right.
Very occasionally. But we will be back for the actual episode right after this.
3, 2, 1, special noise.
Hello and welcome to Josiah is Right About Film. This is a new show I'm doing. It's a podcast inspired by my former one, Popmosis, which I did with my buddies Tyler and Paul. So thanks to them, we decided to stop doing that. So I wanted to keep talking about movies, so I'm doing one on my own. And I really wanted to talk about this movie for a long time. This particular film, Masters of the Universe, was the reason I wanted to do that podcast. It was the first film I wanted to do. and I'd want to do it forever. And PowerCon is coming up. We're going to record this. This is at very end of August. PowerCon is basically 2 weeks from when we're recording this. So I'll get this edited and up for you guys before then. So come see me at PowerCon. You can get one of, or possibly all of, my special Josiah is Right trading cards. So there's Josiah, there's Judy, there's Penny, there's Prim. No, that's Akira. That's the dog. I skipped my other daughter. There's Prim. And there's the family. So you can come get all of us. Each one is a numbered. There will only be 250 ever printed of this very special series of collectible cards inspired by the original Master of the Universe, the He-Man cards. There's the front of one. You can just see the inspiration there. And even the back is inspired by the back. There you go. So thanks to Bryan, actually, who was joining me for this episode, my friend Bryan, who I'll introduce properly in 1 second. He also helped me, gave me feedback as I was designing those cards, because he is actually a professional, not just some amateur messing around with some software he doesn't know how to use. So Bryan is an art director, production designer. He worked on Last Man on Earth. He worked on, I just saw that you worked on Euphoria, which I didn't realize. He worked on Murder in the First. And a long time ago, I was living with a guy named Ian, and Bryan and Ian were friends. And Bryan kind of would hang out with Ian, so I'd see Bryan every now and again. I wasn't so sure about him. We worked on a movie that was a disaster. We will share that story for another time. But I want to say, yeah, I want to say that was what made us friends. We went through this very traumatic sort of experience that solidified our friendship in a very short amount of time, and that was closer to 20 years ago now than it wasn't. I've been in California for 19 years now. And so that was maybe a year, less than a year after I've been here. So say hello, Bryan.
Hi. Yeah. Film has a way of, when you're in the trenches working on it, the tougher it is, the more it brings you closer to the people or makes you never want to see them again, but not a lot of gray relationships.
And I think that's what I said at the end of that very long night.
I remember that night.
Forever, or we're never going to talk again.
We were standing in the cul-de-sac of my driveway, and we were trying to figure out what to do with a truck full of stuff. The night I decided not to continue on the show, and I believe the battery
on the truck died.
And the battery on the truck died, and Josiah said to me, "This is either gonna mean we're great friends from here on out, or this is the last night we ever talk to each other." And I'm glad it went the way that it did, because now I'm here on a podcast.
Yeah, this is the culmination of all that here. This
was actually the reason I've been wanting to be friends.
And obviously Bryan's expertise is in just our friendship is why I want him on this. But this particular episode is because of Masters of the Universe. Bryan is a big He-Man fan, not necessarily of the film we're going to talk about. So first, I'm going to give you kind of a rundown on the movie, who made it, whatnot. So Masters of the Universe released August 7th, 1987. I saw it in the theater, and we'll talk more about that later. Directed by Gary Goddard, not Goddard. No, he's not that Goddard. Gary Goddard, who did a lot of, he did the Captain Power show. Did you ever see that, Bryan, in the late 80s? Like Captain Power. It was very short-lived, but it was like a video game type. It was like live action. If you were to see that, you'd see the connection to this that's there. He also did a lot of like Terminator 3D and amusement park 3D things throughout the 90s. His kind of career shifted that way. And I have to mention, he was also, his name came up in the Bryan Singer accusations. So there's like that dark side. I'm not going to say anything, but just I feel like to just address it at least, because if you Google that stuff, his name's in there. Written by David Odell, who's a Muppet guy who wrote The Dark Crystal. Frank Langella is Skeletor. Dolph Lundgren is He-Man. Meg Foster is Evil Lynn. Billy Barty as Gwildor. And Courtney Cox is Julie. Robert Duncan McNeil is Kevin. And since I'm here with Pickles Langer, I forgot that joke. I was in my notes with Pickles Langer. Christina Pickles plays the sorceress. And it's hilarious that we talked about that in our intro we filmed a few days ago, just sort of previewing things. She's also Courtney Cox's mom on Friends. Yes. So this is Courtney Cox's first move. The woman who plays sorceress would go on to play her mother on the biggest show of the 90s. Probably.
I hope it was part of her deal. I'll take this show, Friends, is it called? As long as I can have the sorceress play my mom eventually on the series.
That was the deal, yeah. It also stars Pig Boy, who is Richard Sponser, who was a contest winner who won like a contest for He-Man be in the Masters of the Universe movie. And he's in the movie, like Skeletor like hands him his staff when they go in the Castle Grayskull. So like it's a little Easter egg to watch for. It was produced by Yoram Golbis and Menachem Golan, who are infamous Canon Films, which we'll talk about. It impacts this film. We talked about it briefly in our intro part. The art department, production designer was William Stout, who is most famous for his designs on this film. He's really mostly worked as a conceptual designer if you look at his credits, and that's really what he excels at if you look at his work. Art director was Robert Howland, who I looked up his stuff, and unfortunately he died in 88. So this was basically, I think, his last film. Richard Enlund is the special effects guy, and he goes back to Star Wars. That was his first credit. So those are kind of the people that are maybe responsible or to be held to blame, depending on your point of view. As I've said before, I like this movie. I might even say I love it, but I understand it as a flawed movie. So in our little preamble piece that we recorded a few days ago, Bryan's words to describe it were not good. And I said, well, I think it's at least good.
Not good.
Would you hold true to your statement of not and good as your two words?
I'm gonna upgrade it.
Okay.
I'm gonna upgrade this movie to not great, which is a big deal for me considering the opinions I had of it.
Yeah.
And I do see what could have captured one at that age.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I'm sort of shocked that it didn't work for me. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
I feel like really early on, I might have also like heard criticism of it that then made me go, yeah, you're right. It is terrible. Because it's really no different from all of the other junk that I'm in love with.
Yeah, especially those 80s movies, like that era of movies that we grew up watching on VHS over and over and over again. It's just for whatever reason, it slipped through the cracks for you. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of people.
In fact, it not is it like those movies, it is those other movies.
Yes.
There are pieces of every other 80s movie in there in an attempt, I think, to appeal to all of those other people. Well, let's take a little bit of this off of that menu and
maybe to a problematic degree, but at the same time, you can see what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and I think in general with filmmaking, setting out to make what you want to make that is its own thing typically works better than trying to make something that ticks the boxes of other things you've seen.
And we talked about a little bit I was sort of defending choices from the point of view of the toy company, and that's where things start to get problematic in terms of checking the boxes, right? Gary Goddard, he wanted to make a film that was a tribute to Jack Kirby, the comic book artist, and specifically like New Gods. Those comics in particular had a big influence here, and if you read those comics, you can see, and those comics had an influence on Star Wars, and there's a lot of Star Wars in this movie, or this attempts at Star Wars. And you can really see that in this film, the Skeletor, the good guy, bad guy, very simple, good versus evil kind of dynamic. And that's what he wanted. That's his vision for it. But then you have the producers who are like, let's make this as cheaply as possible. And then you have the toy company who is like, here is our list of demands and restrictions and things like that. For example, He-Man couldn't actually kill people. That's why you have those black stormtroopers that are robots, because couldn't have him kill anyone. So those kind of things. I'm sure there were other restrictions that I'm not aware of, but that here's boxes to check while you're still trying to have your own unique vision for a film. And most of the time it's not a successful film most of the time.
And they wanted, because I don't know about this, they wanted to sell new toys in new designs, I assume, going with this. It wasn't an effort to sell the toys from the animated series.
Yeah, exactly. It was my understanding you have to introduce so many new characters to have more new toys on the shelves. So that's why, or at least different looking ones. That was almost like a prerequisite from what I understand from the toy company's requests.
Well, I think that's pretty evident in the the decision to have Skeletor have an alternate outfit.
Yeah, and I've
that
oddly
screamed, toy shelf to me.
Yeah, but that's also like that alternate outfit's very Jack Kirby New Gods. The way the design of it's very in that direction. But the weird thing is they ended up only releasing 3 toys from this film. They released like the Gwildor, Blade, and one of the other bad guys, the lizard guy. I'm forgetting his name.
And you shouldn't remember it.
But that guy, it starts with an S. It's like Sauron, something like that.
In addition to He-Man.
I don't think they did a He-Man for the line. If they did, they just produced the old He-Man toy and maybe the packaging said the movie. And the same with Skeletor. As far as I know, that they didn't even bother to create, like retool the characters for the new design. But I can't speak to that. So let's start talking about the actual movie because we need to complain about that and celebrate that. Or the film starts out quite awesome. It starts out with these epic shots, and it's this really dramatic narration, and you see Eternia and you see the castle and these great matte shots, very 80s, like the epitome of 80s filmmaking before digital effects would take over everything just a few years after this. And then Skeletor bursts into Castle Grayskull. That's the beginning of the movie, and that's when he hands the thing to the pig boy. I'm pretty sure that's when that happens. No, God! But regardless, he comes in. Skeletor has just won the war. He has won Castle Grayskull. And rewatching this, my first thought was that was the movie I wanted to see.
Right.
That's the movie. I want to see how that happened.
We pick up just after what you were interested in.
Yes.
Yes, after this very 80s psychedelic Superman-esque title sequence with music that is in the whole John Williams knockoff. Hey John, will you do this movie? No, okay, we'll just make it sound like this title sequence was yours.
You know who did the music though? Bill Conti.
Yeah, and Bill Conti.
Rocky.
Bill Conti is the real deal.
Yeah, and the music.
You have to believe they wanted John Williams first.
No, and the music's good, but it's definitely derivative of Williams. Yes. It's a really good score, but it's clear what we want this to sound like that.
And we know that Bill Conti has talent. And in fact, he might be the most talented person who worked on this film.
So what are your thoughts on the Eternia sequences? As I know you're a fan of the show, and sort of you described being a fan of the mystique of the show and the character, and all, I should say less not show, but more the toys. As am I. Like I liked the show, enjoyed it, but the toys were really what was. I would take those toys and tell my own stories. The action figures were my first storytelling tools, and these were some of my first action figures, He-Man ones. Well,
I'm always looking at the design, and they made interesting decisions. The terrain of Eternia in the animated sequences was always, if you can tell from a background cell that's He-Man, that's Eternia. And so one thing they attempted to do, I looked up the filming location because it was like, this looks familiar, is they did shoot at Vasquez Rocks.
Okay.
Out past Santa Clarita. And it's great, right? But there's not enough of it. When you go to the inside of Castle Grayskull, in these sequences where we see Skeletor, all of a sudden it all becomes just so angular, and it's like this new vision of what Eternia looks like, and to me it doesn't land with how I see Eternia. Mm-hmm. It's just this much more modern faux finish disaster of a set that sort of screams of maybe a lack of budget. More, either they're trying to set themselves apart or they're trying to save money. But
I think the problem is, I think it's both.
Yeah,
because that's a huge set. That's a huge set. Like they have these, one thing about it is these great wide shots as and it's full of people. They
one of them.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. I want more Eternia.
No, totally. But just like, as you were saying, like the backgrounds on the cards.
Exactly.
What I did was when I made these, I went and grabbed different, screen grabs of backgrounds and like those spikes and those things that make it unique. And yeah, they have
organic.
Yeah, organic, exactly. And you, like you said, you didn't get enough of that world. You had part of it is the fact that it doesn't take place in that world, but even when you're there, what you see is just, it's all that desert rock as opposed to the diversity of the landscape that you would get in the show. You get a lot of different, I mean, sure, they would reuse those backgrounds, but the 10 backgrounds they had were all very distinct. So
oh man, and the one you just showed on your card with those spikes coming out of the sides of caves, I mean, that's so iconically He-Man background. And where was that? I wanted that.
But, so what do you think, while we're on the design, what do you think of the design of the exterior of Castle Grayskull in the movie?
That I liked.
I did too. I liked it a lot.
It left me wanting more of that, not more of something else. I'm like, I got one matte painting of it, and I did like the design of that because it was gritty, and it had, but it doesn't match the interior.
That's the thing. Exactly. Yeah.
The interior,
because that looks like something that was like formed out of something that happened, as opposed to when you go inside, it looks like something that people made.
Yeah. And that's, left hand and right hand, maybe not, talking to each other or shaking. But look, I've made enough visuals for shows to know that everything is done with restriction. And it's our job as art department to hide that as much as possible. And there were parts of this where it feels like this is the best we're going to be able to do, and almost had a sense of humor about it. I wonder, it's also the late 80s, standards were different, for visuals, but what I found to be interesting about this is that this 1987 film is strikingly visually similar to a 90s television series where the budgets are very low, but you could see just in like 4 or 5 years that they can do all of this for television, which doesn't say a whole lot for the aesthetic of this film.
It just the development of the process where they could do how far like compositing and things came, and that was like a repackaged of a Japanese show, but then they eventually shot them here, I think. But they probably shot like, it's because how it is, you're in Southern California, like there's the weird rocks over there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Like exactly. Gotta go to everybody's got to go there.
Well, you're right, and maybe
and Southern California doesn't unfortunately have the most diverse landscape. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and before I came here, I didn't realize how every movie looks like. I can spot LA in every movie when it's posing as New York. It doesn't matter. Downtown LA, I know what downtown looks like, but the landscapes, the way the vegetation is, the trees, when it's supposed to be a foresty sequence, it's taking place somewhere in the Midwest or something. You're like, yeah, they filmed that up somewhere near, the like Fox used to have their like ranch where they film like Planet of the Apes and everything. It's that kind of setting.
There's a lot of diversity for a single place, but it's all within a scope.
Yeah.
But it's a much wider scope than many other places in this country, which is why early Hollywood worked, and they could do jungle movies, and they could do Westerns, and they could do space, and they could do all of these different things here. And they may not look like the real thing, but at least you can pull different looks out of LA, because LA is a mess. So Skeletor enters immediately. I'm like, stormtroopers.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, hold on. I thought I put on Masters of the Universe, and I checked the guide, and I wasn't watching Star Wars. I was watching Masters of the Universe. But as they get into some of these other places outside of Eternia, I'm like, we're in Mad Max. And it's really interesting because that very raw look works now. Like, they could make a movie in that world now very successfully, where they're like, everything is sort of post apocalyptic, like destruction. Like, visual storytellers know how to do that look now. In the 80s, in this movie, it just like looks like we ran around in a bunch of alleys.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because there was a planned sequel that they were developing, and from what I've understood, the script was essentially a post-apocalyptic. Have you ever seen the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Cyborg? The low budget, sort of the dystopian, like maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Is that our next one?
It could be. Again, I liked it as a kid, but I don't know if that one would hold up for me.
Cyborg. I like that it has Psy in it. Psy.
That film was apparently, the early drafts were going to be the He-Man sequel, and they just redeveloped it so they could make something else, because it was going to be a lower budget sequel filmed with that style, using that wasteland sort of aesthetic. That they were going to go fully with that. I think they realized, oh, there's something here. If nothing else, that was what could have made the movie more unique, because then you have that problem, and it's an 80s cliche problem. Sometimes it's done in a good way, like Monster Squad, I think, is a really good example, where you have suburbia, the monsters come. Last Starfighter, I think, is an okay example too, where it's suburbia, but again, like Southern California. These are all things that clearly look like Southern California now to me, but as a kid in the 80s, it was middle America. Even E.T., these things coming to suburbia, kind of E.T. started it, all these things coming to Earth in a weird way. And then, I mean, we know the budgetary restrictions, but part of the problem is it's less about the budget and more about, you seem like 5 other movies that came out in the last couple of years.
And I think there's a difference between how can we make a Masters of the Universe movie for a buck versus it's a story about an alien that comes down and lives with a child, which is that's a good story. Or Last Starfighter, where we need to get somebody from Earth. This movie and some of the other ones where it's driven by the budget, it's just like, oh, well, we can't do Eternia, so how can we do the story in Los Angeles?
Yeah. Because I was thinking, oh, what's another example? Like Neverending Story, but that one's almost the reverse, where the Earth is the framing device, and then most of it happens in the world. Whatever the world is. What
year was that?
What's that?
What year was that?
That was maybe 83, 84.
Yeah, there's Eternia.
Yeah.
Right? Go look up what those locations were and go shoot it there. Perfect.
And the funny thing is, those two movies are 2 of my earliest memories in a movie theater. And
that movie was one of the ones that I watched until the tape broke.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
So
for the rest of the podcast, we're going to talk about the Neverending Story
movies that we prefer over this one. Now, I promise, Bryan, that we will do. This is like sort of. This is again. It's not it's not a bad movie, but it's so built within limitations and choices that aren't the best choice for the character, and all these different things that hurt what should have been just an awesome adventure film, and it really hurts that, because when you just take out He-Man and tell me the plot of this movie, I said, that's a cool, interesting movie. But then when you're like, oh, it's a He-Man movie, it's about this cosmic key and Courtney Cox and all those things. Because I really think, even just emotionally in the story beats, all those things hit and they work. The performances, I think, are generally good. And the Courtney Cox and the guy who plays Kevin, they get way too much screen time, but they also are very believable. Like, there's a point in the movie where it's like 15 minutes of no He-Man, from pretty much from when they get to Eternia until Courtney Cox runs into him. it's the other characters. You're with you're at the chicken shack. You're at all these other things. And again, I think another limitation was Dolph Lundgren. So I guess we'll talk about that since we're on that topic.
Yeah.
What do you think of Dolph Lundgren as He-Man?
Well, to your other points, I have this in my notes. Where's He-Man? That's my notes. This is a Skeletor movie.
Yeah.
Skeletor commands the story. And He-Man didn't really even need to be there. I'm not sure what he did to propel the story. And he seems like a bystander in this story. Now, granted, it isn't He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. This is just the Masters of the Universe. And I really felt like he was a backseat passenger in this story that's about Gwildor and the Key and Skeletor and Courtney Cox, and He-Man just happens to be there. And I didn't find any of his sequences to be terribly powerful. Well, okay. And I think it's because he just shows up for a moment here and there. Yeah, and I want a He-Man movie.
Yeah, because like I said, I kind of gave credit to, and I think Dolph Lundgren's not like, he doesn't deserve any kind of hate, but he doesn't do anything either. He doesn't do anything to like prove he's bad, like so awful that he's just awful, but he doesn't do anything to prove that he is awesome as He-Man.
Yeah, and I didn't see it as being, if I can call him by his first name, Dolph.
I must break you.
I didn't see it as being his acting was a problem. I think it was the utilization of this character in the script.
Victory.
He's, I believe, Swedish, and especially at the time, I know English wasn't his strongest. He's coming off of Ivan Drago, basically, right? Connecting the Rocky movies. And here he is as the lead. There's like a joke in, I think it's in the Toys That Made Us show, where apparently like Stallone visited the set and he's like, you gave that guy lines? Like that was, I don't know if it's true, but that's like one of the jokes if you watch the Toys That Made Us, which is great. The He-Man episode is probably one of the best ones. But that idea that he couldn't carry, I know he had to read up his own lines to make it more clear. And my thought was, if you look at like Gal Gadot, like for Wonder Woman, they embraced her accent for the character and let that be unique. I don't know if it would work as well with him in having a stronger Swedish accent, because it's not as, to at least the American ear, it's not as, quote, foreign. When we hear that accent, we probably think Swedish, whereas with Gal Gadot, we think, oh, that's different. I don't know where that comes from.
Where were the buff Americans? We got to get them all on loan. I mean, we got Arnold and Dolph, and I mean,
well, you know, the
Sylvester
sequel,
Stallone's American and he can't speak.
Yeah.
Totally. So the sequel would actually going to have Laird Hamilton play it, and he was a surfer at the time. So I can imagine you go from a Swedish guy to a surfer dude. I don't know what the dynamic would have been. So he would have been the guy in that post-apocalyptic He-Man, because Dolph was done. Apparently wasn't a great experience for him, just in different levels. But I always feel like he gets like hate that he doesn't necessarily deserve, but like you really pointed out, and watching it again on this viewing, you can really see it's the first time I've really noticed he is, like you said, he's a passenger. He disappears in, again, it's not called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but we all know,
we expect it. Who
is Dolph Lundgren? Is his name's even above Frank Langella. I'm pretty sure he's top billed in this. So it'd be interesting to count screen time to see, but he feels very backseat. And the thing that, watching it as a writer, what I'm seeing it again, I really felt like the emotional story that Courtney Cox in particular had, it works for this film and it carries through, but her interactions and the things that gives her strength, it comes from talking to Tila and Man-at-Arms, and it comes from talking to Gwildor and things like that. It comes from all these other characters, and He-Man at one point just kind of like hugs her and saves her, but he doesn't like other little moments, even when Kevin has the thing on his neck, like He-Man should be the one that takes it off. Just little things like that. It's always even the small moments, the other characters always seem to be the one doing things.
Did we ever figure out where this is supposed to be?
It does. I think there's one point watching it where they reference flying to Catalina.
Don't go to Catalina, okay?
So maybe because that's where the parents were going to fly, or they were going to take the boat or something. So it seems like it is acknowledging that it's set in Southern California.
Because I did catch 2 palm trees in the cemetery.
Yeah. I think they were like not hiding that fact, but they didn't want it to be I think that was strategic, where we won't say it outright, but we'll try to shoot it in a way that this could be anywhere. But if a palm tree sneaks in, it is Southern California.
It's incredible that that's where the portal accidentally took them.
That's the way it always goes. That's why aliens are always attacking New York.
What I assume the main street must have been, because one of the filming locations was Whittier.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Whittier, but
that's Whittier.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of the smaller cities in Southern California, particularly in Orange County, have that classic American type of main street, that Disneyland-esque main street. Honestly, I feel like they have them more here than where I come from. I grew up, the first street I lived on was called Main Street, and it looked nothing like these places. I know places where I grew up that are like that, but there's a lot of them in Southern California that are like that classic main street. My last place was on a main street like that, but that's sort of, I think, what their intention was. This could be anywhere, but we're not going to go bend over backwards to hide the fact that it's California, because a palm tree is going to slip in there inevitably.
That's right. Speaking of Whittier, what line was Whittier than "Woman at Arms"? They really slid that one in there. That was fantastic.
Woman at Arms.
I also really enjoyed A Curious Quartet I didn't appreciate those characters themselves. I love that they were referred to as a curious quartet.
So a lot of also the Skeletor lines, Frank Langella came up with a lot of his own stuff.
He's like, this script is terrible. I was just gonna wing it.
Like, I was watching it today,
and eyeballs.
And there's a line where when he finally has He-Man captured, he's like,
"Tell me about the loneliness of good, He-Man. Is it equal to the loneliness of evil?"
And I thought, wow, that's, deep stuff, Skeletor.
Thank you for that bit of philosophy.
And that's where the movie is, and I think that's been said. You pointed it out, and that's been said multiple times. The problem with this movie, which is also weirdly why it works, is that it's a Skeletor movie. He is so good, so like every moment he's on screen, you want to see more of him, and that's problematic. You want to have it like the reverse in terms of screen time. I almost feel like with He-Man, you want He-Man to fill that time, that void, like where if you don't see He-Man for 15 minutes, you want something's wrong with the movie. Whereas you don't see Skeletor for 15 minutes, you're aching for more Skeletor because he's awesome. And it's just
what occurred to me today was the challenge of converting animated Skeletor to a character for live action.
Yeah.
And the fact that they had to add eyeballs within empty sockets. So it's a skeleton of a human that used to have eyes that now has eyes with inside the skeletal holes.
And that considered, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
That's something that when I see it, so I was watching it today with my daughter Penny, and Penny is 4. She's 4.5, as she corrected me the other day. She's 4.5, not 4. But she was watching it, and she I didn't tell her what it was when it was on, but she knew it was He-Man. She goes, "I've never seen Skeletor like that before." I said, "Yeah, because she's seen the cartoon where it looks a certain way." Interesting thing though, Frank Langella, whenever he took the role because he had a kid that's probably about our age that was a fan of He-Man, and that's why he wanted to do it. He did it just when they offered it to him, because this is my gift to my kid to get to do this movie. And he, at the time, he said he was really in good shape, and he was really fit. So he was ready to be in something that was much more revealing to show his musculature, his physique, as Skeletor was in the cartoon and the toys, that just like He-Man, Skeletor is buff with a skeleton face. So that was his intention. And then they put all these, and I think it looks cool.
And they hit it.
Yeah, that's the problem. And it looks cool. The design, I think, of his costume is a cool costume, but it is then, okay, he's got a hood. Is he the Emperor from Star Wars? And he the nature of the character kind of is Darth Vader-y. And again, another Star Wars that thing. One thing like I liked about this movie is like the long flowing capes and stuff, that the costuming, they really, where they spent some of the money, you can really see it when you put your money on screen. I think that's always a good thing in a movie like this, where then I read like things, everybody's costume weighed like 50 pounds. Like Dolph Lundgren said, that sword was gigantic and heavy, plus the cape, so he could barely move in it, and all these different things. But at least you see it there. But at the same time, certain characters don't look enough like what you want them to look like. I understand introducing some new characters, but for example, you talked about the Dust Bunny Beast Man.
So who I was referring to for the Dust Bunny was what turned out to be Gwildor.
Oh, Gwildor. Oh, I thought you met Beastman.
No.
But I realized when when we talked about it, you mentioned something with a weird nose, and I was like, I gave you like a weird look, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I forget Gwildor has an enormous nose? Now it's on me.
I had this recollection of this fuzzy reddish brown. I wouldn't even know what to call that thing. And that was Gwildor, and so they invented a character that was a big part. But these henchmen that they put together, one of them was Predator, one of them was like Sloppy Beast Man.
Yeah, and he's the only one that was directly from a toy. Was that Beast Man? He was just the movie version of Beast Man. And then I kind of wish, like, it's interesting. You have He-Man, Tila, Man-at-Arms. Those are like the three main characters for the good guys that you'd want to see, I think. I feel like you have Skeletor, you have Eva Lynn, but I feel like for the henchmen, you should have it split somehow. Two, like, two guys, and then introduce two new guys.
Instead of Trapjaw or Whiplash or any of these other amazing, they had so many that they could pick from. You have like Tuna Can Man and like Dried Prune Face Man,
Commander Karg, and they look great.
They look terrible.
No, they look great. I think they look great. No, but I don't care about
one of them was a Shredder ripoff. I know that Ninja Turtles hadn't come out yet, so they must rip them off from the cartoon.
Well, the comics existed, so maybe I don't think the cartoon was out yet either, but the comics did exist, so they could.
Those four characters were incredibly disappointing to me, and when they killed off when they facial issue guy,
Beast Man. When he got blood on him, or the lizard guy when Skeletor zapped him?
Yeah, when they zap him, I was like, God, get rid of all of them. They're all terrible. I don't want to see them anymore. Couldn't even stand looking at that lizard guy at all. And the perm, these characters were so disappointing to me. And
I can see why. For me, it's that view. So I was 5 years old in 1987. My grandmother, who we called Nanny, took myself and my brothers to see this movie. It was a big deal. We all went and saw it, and it had a huge impact on me as a 5-year-old. Seeing this movie, I was like, I'd seen He-Man. I knew of He-Man. I played with the toys. I'd seen the cartoon, but my impression of what He-Man was probably wasn't fully set. So that for me, this movie, as much as those other things, other than the toys, helped determine this is what He-Man is. The toys are number one in terms of determining it. Like, as I mentioned, as a creator, I always think back to, and this is the reason I surround myself with these things, because it helps inspire me. The first stories I would tell were with action figures. At Christmas time, I would go shopping with my mom for my presents. I would know which figures I had, and I would set up this elaborate story that would last from like August. My mom used to do layaway, so you should put it on layaway until December when I get the presents. And it would be an adventure where this X-Men character or whatever, He-Man would have to rescue his friends who were frozen. And that was what the culmination of the storyline on Christmas morning was, him freeing his friends from the ice. But of course, bad guys got freed too. So a whole new story would then begin. That was how I did that for several years in my childhood. I have these storylines for toys that I was about to play with. And the toys were literally the first storytelling tools that I had. So those had a stronger influence in terms of what He-Man was than anything. And part of it, I think, as a fan of He-Man, it's here. It's mostly here. Even when I see the cartoon, there's times where I see the cartoon and watch it back, I'm like, whoa, that's weird and trippy. I don't remember that. Like I watched an episode recently where it's like Moms from Earth, and I had no recollection of that. Like they tell her backstory in this episode, things like that. There's so many, and the show is awesome in its own right and weird and wacky things. But my version of He-Man was probably a little bit more akin to like Conan the Barbarian, which if you read the early He-Man mini comics, it was a lot more in that vein. It was much darker. And then it became, the Filmation show really brightened it. And then that's what kind of had the influence. So then you have the movie, who's this wholly other thing that came along. So I think that's where I was. So for me, this is He-Man as much as those other things, aside from the action figures. And I also want to say, while I'm talking about reminiscing about going to the theater, this and Never Ending Story are two of my earliest film going memories. And they're both also two of the scariest things I ever remember seeing in a theater. The part in Never Ending Story when he encounters, it's not the Nothing, but it's like that wolf creature that is sort of the emissary for the Nothing. When he's talking in that cave and he's like, you're just all doomed. That terrified me beyond belief. And then the sequence in this movie where they're attacking her in the gym, when they're chasing her, the way the music is, the tension to the music there, and the way the fire happens and she's running and she can't get out and she gets trapped under the stage and they're being stabbed. That scared me so much that when I watched it, I still like, it's that post-traumatic stress or something where I flash back to me as a kid, remembering that moment and how that made me feel. And I remember having nightmares. I wasn't one prone to nightmares about things I saw. I watched a lot of things that were, I remember right around the same age, I watched Predator because I'm related. I'm a distant cousin, as Brian knows, to Shane Black, who's screenwriter who was in Predator. I was allowed to watch it because he was in it, but I watched the uncensored version of it. And that didn't faze me. But this moment in this film, I had nightmares about Beastman coming, and Beastman, and like when even when she puts it on his face and he's like snarling and stuff. So for me, that's the impact of that character. So it's a different window. It's hard for me to have the objective view. It's very subjective to me as a 5-year-old in that moment being afraid. So
by the time I'd seen this movie, I was already probably had seen Cobra 3 or 4 times. So
right, the hatchets.
Somebody coming into the school after her, I had already seen serial killer with the...
No, totally true. Yeah, in context, like, oh, this sequence had been done in 12 other movies.
Yeah,
but that was the first
in
one
a much
for me.
scarier way. And they had seen Commando, and I had seen Death Wish already, and so maybe this was just too light for me by the time it came out, and I just went back to watching like these super intense movies I shouldn't have been watching with my dad. We can't ignore the fact that Strickland shows up.
Oh yeah, like
I mean, this is one of the highlights of the movie for me. And then not only is he the exact same character, but just with a different type of job, at some point they give him a shotgun.
Yes.
I wanted him to say he led slackers. They did everything to emulate it except for that. And so I wonder, and maybe you know, was this a character actor who only could play himself? Or were they like, you know, that character you played, we like him. Give us that.
I feel like it's the former, because what else have you seen him in where he's not a version of that?
I don't know. What else was he in?
Yeah. Not even 100% sure, but I feel like anytime you see him, that's him. This is the most extreme take on that, but
he jumped into this movie right from that movie. They were like, Principal Strickland, I'm sorry to let you know, we're going to let you go. And he's like, the police department has been calling me, asking me if I wanted to come over and work for them. So he went from Hill Valley over to Whittier and joined the
he was in
force.
Top Gun, he was in War Games, and if you think of those movies, again, those are very Top Gun. He's one of the commandery people. He was even in the Top Gun video game, actually, that came out like on the PlayStation, like 10 or so years after the movie, where he basically played that character again. So yeah, Boiling Point, a lot of cop movies, Hang Fire, Dick Tracy, I didn't realize he was in that. But a lot of those, the rules, if you're just looking at the title of True Blood, but not the later True Blood, this is 1989 detective type True Blood, Split Decisions, things like that, Viper, movies like that where he's Colonel. Like, I wonder, without like looking it up right now, if he is like R. Lee Emery was, for ex-military, and that's how he became an actor. He was the consultant on Full Metal Jacket, and he was better than the guy that they had cast, and then just eventually
he has a career of playing that character.
Exactly. It feels like the same thing just glancing at it, because when I think about the things I have seen him in, like Top Gun, that stands out, and a few other cop type movies, that he's that guy. Although like this one, though, like you said, the shotgun and all those things,
today's modern cinema, though, I think has a lot more scrutiny, and I think that the casting directors are under more pressure to not just grab the exact same person to play that same role again. If you're trying to make something quality, maybe less so in like procedural television or something. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that guy is a great
that guy can do
guy
it.
At the motel, who's the motel owner, who cares?
Yeah.
But if you're trying to make a nice film, you might go against cast more, to make it special. Strickland.
No, exactly. It's funny watching, because I think his character's name's Lubbock or something. So, like, but
it's Strickland.
But he is, regardless of what his name is, it's totally exactly the same. Whereas I think his thing is the version of that character. I don't think there's much beyond that. Just again, reading over those credits and the titles of those movies where he's always Colonel this, Captain that. He's always in some kind of aggressive authority figure. That's him. But this is the exact same characterization. There's no nuance to it whatsoever. But the best part of his character, he then just, I'm going to stay in Eternia. Which is,
okay. I love it here.
Like,
that, like,
all of a sudden he has like
things
his hot young Eternia wife.
Yeah, you could just objectify them.
Where did she come from?
Yeah. I'm staying here. The women are great. I'm not going back to work in the school. McFly's there. He's always late. Do you think that this franchise could exist now in a origin story format where we have a movie to kick it all off, and then you have Beastman story, you have Trapjaw story? I feel like these characters are so cool. They could each get a movie.
I can see that happening simply because that's the thing now in movies, where it's like, let's do Snake Eye Origins, this guy Origins, Wolverine Origins, whereas this was the 80s derivative. They could make this as the modern derivative. I would hope that they wouldn't, because they could, though. There's really interesting characters there, because I want to see, I guess before you mess around with that, can we just get a good He-Man movie?
Right.
Then we can backtrack and make all the prequels.
I'll take anything.
Yeah, but I want He-Man first. I want a good He-Man movie before we make a okay or good or even great Trapjaw movie.
I mean, what a title.
The Manny Faces trilogy, it was awesome. But Triclops part 1, 2, 3, and 4. But I think we need that first.
We do. Who would you cast as He-Man?
Well, they cast someone, and they haven't said he's not someone. I was going to say Jesse Centeno, who was a buddy of ours, but
no, he wouldn't be good.
No, the actor's name is Centeno. His last name is Centeno. So that was cast in the role of He-Man.
Is there a movie coming?
Supposedly again, but it's always been, we talked about this on our preamble piece, that on this version it'll be shorter. There is a separate video where Bryan and I has full conversation, about 20 minutes long. On this video, it'll only be about five minutes. So there's a longer version where we talk a bit about those things, but the development of it went basically, I mean, obviously now when you think about it, since this movie came out, they tried to make a sequel for the first probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then there was a big gap. And then in the mid 2000s, since then, it's been developing.
They need to make it soon. I mean, they need to capitalize. We're the age now to have expendable income to, as adults, dive back into He-Man. I mean, it's perfect.
Like this. I mean, I have Dolph here. This is a modern action figure. This is not, they never made this version of Dolph Lundgren at the time. So this is the Super 7 modern version. So as we kind of like gear to wrap things up, I do want to talk about we began with the beginning of this movie. Let's talk about the conclusion of this film. So the film, it ends in a weirdly backlit action fight with God Skeletor versus He-Man, and this giant set that we talked about at the beginning that they don't even really utilize for the fight. And the reason for that was apparently a few days before the end of shooting, the production company, Menachem Golan and Golan Globus Canon Films, pulled their funding because they didn't like how things were going. They were having some serious financial issues at the time. They pulled their funding and they were basically, this film is done, even though it was like 3 days from being complete or something. I don't know exactly how many days. So the director plus a few of the actors got together to just essentially film that without proper lighting because they couldn't do everything. That's why it has that weird backlight. That's why that final fight looks the way it does. They had choreographed something much more elaborate, but the bottom fell out of the movie, and they saved that for the end, for probably because I assume maybe they would destroy some of the set, which I think they did little bits where like pillars came down. I kind of assume
one of them.
Yeah. But you assume that more stuff would happen. And again, that's the kind of thing where you didn't get enough of that stuff from He-Man, where these great feats of strength.
We come to the feats of strength.
That was like the one and only time.
There was no feat of strength.
That was it.
There was the pillar.
That was the one pillar. Yeah. You should, and maybe even that, like do something at the beginning, like tease that somehow, that he does something that is a little bit smaller, but it's challenging for him. So then that moment means more. But there was nothing like that in this movie. So what do you think of the dramatic conclusion of this film?
Well, I think leading up to the conclusion, we talked about Christina Pickles. Who was Christina Pickles? Christina Pickles was a sorceress, and we find out that basically it's perfect. Skeletor has been brining her the entire movie, and she's becoming a pickle. She was so beautiful at the beginning, and slowly she's been being brined. I mean, it was amazing when I realized
it was wow. The movie is so meta.
Yeah, how that all worked together, and then have to say that red lasso whip that we saw in Eternia, that was cool.
That was pretty cool.
I love
that. And as cool as it was, though, it's just a whippy lightsaber.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I love it. I can't reach him where I'm sitting, but that's Blade. That's like the modern version, like these guys too. That's the modern version of Blade. He is one of the figures that did get released in the 80s though. So there is like a 1987 version of Blade, the knife sword guy. So he, with that whip. Yeah, I like that too. But again, it's also.
And the one that'll be missing from your house the day after I come to visit next time.
What happened to my little laser whip thing?
The whip, and I think the props throughout were fantastic. I actually thought the props were terrific.
And with that, props to William Stout, as we mentioned, who was the art director, production designer on this film, who did a lot of the design work on that. Like, as much as I'm in our little preamble, Bryan mentioned didn't like the idea that He-Man had a gun. He-Man's gun is cool looking.
Yeah, everything looks so cool for the props. I wrote down the key, the scanner.
The key is awesome too.
The bucket of chicken looked perfect.
And even that restaurant set, that's in like it doesn't belong in a He-Man movie. But
the collar of truth was a little like they ran out of time on that, but the hologram serving dish that they presented was super cool.
Use of holograms again was cool. Like I loved at the beginning, giant Skeletor over the Eternia landscape, which we didn't mention. Those kind of things. And there's these little nuggets in this movie that hidden within this movie is the movie that they wanted to make but couldn't make. If they would have made a 25-minute movie, it would have probably been like the episode of the show length. It would have been perfect.
Yeah,
if they would put all the money into that. But
so as we get into Eternia at the end, the sword lock, idea was really neat, and I thought that was executed pretty well. And Skeletor's staff is like, they were like, what is the most important prop here? It's the staff and the sword.
Yeah,
and they focused on those, and they got those pretty darn cool. As we go into the end, and all of a sudden we get gold spray paint can Skeletor. I'm like, I had mixed feelings
Kirby
about
God Skeletor.
Yeah,
but it's just like, awesome that it exists as a toy.
Yeah, it was so over the top, but also just so like it's a bunch of gold spray paint, But I admire what they try to do, and that they were trying to up the game for this ending. But again, even as we're talking, I can't remember what He-Man did in any of these scenes. Yeah. I can only remember what Skeletor did. And, again, that's the issue. But new helmet Skeletor was just really, it was something. And that's what you needed. They did something big. It was a little weak at the end, like after all this big stuff. And
yeah, so they raised the stakes with he's got the power of the universe and all this stuff. He's the master of the universe. And then they can't pull it off in any way that's interesting. So
although that ending where it was settled down, I mean, there is a precedent for that in the TV show where they would have their like laughing moments after.
Yeah, totally.
It was all, we're all so happy now. Did you know, I'm fairly certain that as Skeletor is falling and screaming, that his mouth is closed.
Probably.
Yeah.
That effect doesn't hold up really well. The
Die Hard ending.
Yeah, exactly. But with less money put into that special effect.
The matte painting that he was.
The interesting thing about this movie is if you watch the whole way through the end of the credits, there's a post-credit sequence. Before Marvel was doing the first movie that I know of that had this.
I got to cue that up.
You got to watch it. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Those of you who know
what it is.
Those of you who know, but Brian will watch it because I'm not going to spoil it. We'll save that for him. And whenever eventually Brian's going to come on for another movie, maybe a movie that he loves and I hate.
That's great.
We'll do a little snippet on that piece. But any final thoughts? Because I'm at 2% battery and I'm not plugged in right now.
Final thoughts. Wish Adam was in the movie. No Cringer or Battle Cat. Kind of disappointed about that. Yeah. But I don't know how they would have pulled that off. But it is a movie of omissions, and when your omissions shine brighter than what you have in it, that's kind of when you have a problem. But I do think it has crossed over into a movie where if it happened to come on TV now, I'm gonna get hooked in.
All right, we've elevated from turn the TV off, I'm just gonna go to sleep, to I'll watch it and fall asleep. So with that, I want to say thank you so much to Bryan for joining me. This has been awesome to just talk about a movie with a very good friend and launch this new podcast format, video on YouTube here and audio on podcast places. That's a little bit new to me, but thank you so much to Bryan again. I really appreciate it. Appreciate his years of friendship and his hour of talking. And thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, follow me on the podcast stuff. Thank you to everyone who took a moment to listen to this. And as I said, see me at PowerCon, where I'll have my family in action card form. It's all messy in my hand now. Thank you again. And that's it.
And good journey.
Little tear right there for that.